The HOA came after me, trying to evict me from land they didn't even own. Can you believe the nerve of Linda Morrison? This woman had already driven 12 families from their homes over petty things like paint shades and grass length, and now she had her sights set on my 50-acre ranch, claiming my chickens were an eyesore to the neighborhood's aesthetic. Her HOA wasn't even on my property. It was half a mile away. Fast forward 6 months, and there she was, on her knees in a lawyer's office, pleading with me not to strip her of everything she had. How does a cash-strapped veteran with 500 chickens take down the most ruthless HOA president in Texas history? Stick around to find out. That morning, I rolled up to Paradise Ranch. Should have been one of the darkest days of my life. I'd just laid Grandpa Rivers to rest, the man who pieced me back together after I returned, shattered from Iraq. Now I stood before the ranch he'd left me, expecting solitude. Instead, I inherited 500 chickens. Yes, 500. They were everywhere, strutting around the weathered barn, perched in the trees, all led by a stunning rooster Grandpa had dubbed Patton, after the general himself. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. We will narrate your story on our channel. And I swear that bird looked at me like he was sizing up a new recruit. The ranch itself was beautiful in that weathered, authentic way that only comes from decades of honest work. 50 acres of Texas soil with a modest farmhouse that Grandpa built with his own hands back in the 50s. Several chicken coops and views that stretched to the horizon. I spent those first 2 days just walking the property, remembering all the summers I'd spent here as a kid, all the times Grandpa had taught me about life while we fed the chickens or mended fences. He'd saved me, really saved me, when I came back from my second tour with PTSD so bad I couldn't sleep without nightmares. The chickens need routine, he told me. Feed them, water them, talk to them if you want. They'll teach you about living in the present, and damned if he wasn't right. Those birds had helped me find peace when nothing else could. I was checking the property lines with an old survey map when I noticed something interesting. The ranch was definitely not part of any HOA jurisdiction. The nearest development, Willow Creek Estates, was a full half-mile away. On my 3rd day at the ranch, I was kneeling by Grandpa's grave in the small family cemetery on the property, telling him I'd take care of his birds when I heard car doors slamming. I looked up to see a woman in her 50s marching toward me like she owned the place, wearing a business suit that probably costs more than I made in a month back in my logistics job. Behind her was a nervous-looking man I assumed was her husband, practically jogging to keep up with her power walk. "I'm Linda Morrison," she announced before I could even stand up properly. "President of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. You must be the new owner." Her smile was so fake it could have been made of plastic. "Mason Rivers," I said, still holding the flowers I'd brought for Grandpa's grave. "Well, Mason," she continued, not even acknowledging that I was literally at a graveside, "I'm here to discuss your options. You can sell this farm to our development group for $200,000, which is very generous considering the condition it's in." Or she paused dramatically, like she was delivering a death sentence. "Or what?" I asked, feeling my marine instincts kicking in. Something about this woman set off every alarm bell in my head. "Or I will make your life here absolutely unbearable," she said, still smiling, that plastic smile. "You see, your property may not technically be within our HOA, but it falls within what we call our aesthetic impact zone. Those chickens, that rusty barn, those overgrown fields, they're destroying our property values. We have ways of dealing with neighbors who don't cooperate." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the anger that I'd worked so hard to control in therapy. But I was standing at my grandfather's grave and I could almost hear his voice. "Don't let them see you sweat, boy." So I took a deep breath and said, as calmly as I could manage, "Ma'am, this is private property, my property, and you're trespassing. I suggest you leave before I call the sheriff." Linda's smile finally dropped. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. "I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I've removed dozens of problems from this area. You're just another redneck who doesn't understand how things work around here." That's when Patton decided to make his entrance. The rooster came strutting around the corner of the barn like he'd been waiting for his cue, feathers gleaming in the morning sun. He took one look at Linda and apparently decided he didn't like what he saw. With a battle cry that would have made his namesake proud, Patton charged. Linda shrieked and stumbled backward in her high heels, arms windmilling as she tried to keep her balance. Her husband, Robert, tried to play hero, stepping between his wife and the rooster, but Patton was having none of it. He flew up, wings spread wide, and Robert had to literally pick Linda up and carry her back to their Mercedes while Patton pursued them like a feathered fury. I know I shouldn't have laughed, but watching the president of the HOA being carried away from my property by her husband while a rooster chased them was exactly the kind of cosmic justice Grandpa would have loved. Just as their car peeled out of my driveway spitting gravel, Deputy Johnson pulled up in his patrol car. He stepped out, took one look at Patton, strutting back victorious, and shook his head with a grin. "Let me guess," he said. "Linda Morrison?" I nodded and he sighed. "She called in a complaint about being threatened. But between you and me, that woman's been terrorizing folks around here for years. Just watch yourself, Mason. She doesn't like being told no." As he drove away, I noticed my elderly neighbor, Betty Williams, walking over from her property line. She was carrying what looked like a casserole dish and had worry written all over her face. "Mason, honey," she said in a voice that reminded me of my grandmother. "That woman has driven 12 families out of their homes over the years. She's got methods, legal and otherwise. But this time," she paused, looking back toward where Linda's car had disappeared, then handed me not just the casserole, but an old manila envelope. "This time might be different. Your grandpa left this with me. Said to give it to you if Linda ever came sniffing around. Check what's inside and call that lawyer friend of yours from the Marines. You're going to need him." When I received the official notice with 247 HOA violations, I didn't panic. I actually laughed so hard I spit coffee all over violation number 156. Chickens observed walking in counterclockwise direction, causing visual disruption to community standards. I'm not making this up. Linda Morrison had apparently spent hours documenting every possible violation she could dream up, and some of them were beyond absurd. Violation number 1 claimed my roosters crowed outside of acceptable agricultural hours on a ranch that had existed before her precious HOA was even built. Violation number 89 stated that the organic fertilizer smell from my chicken coops was contaminating the air quality of Willow Creek Estates, but my personal favorite was violation number 200. Property owner displayed threatening behavior toward HO. That one came complete with a heavily edited video where she'd cut out the part where she'd threatened me first. I immediately called Bradley Stone, my old Marine buddy who'd become a lawyer after his tours. He also happened to run a channel about legal issues, which would come in handy later. When I read him some of the violations over the phone, he laughed for 5 solid minutes. "Counterclockwise chickens," he wheezed. "Mason, this is either the work of a complete lunatic or a calculated attempt to bury you in paperwork. Probably both. I'm driving down from Dallas tomorrow." But Linda wasn't content to just send papers. The next morning, I woke up to find my power had been cut. The electric company claimed it was scheduled maintenance. But funny how, only my ranch lost power in Texas in July with temperatures hitting 105 degrees. My 500 chickens were trapped in coos that were quickly becoming ovens. I spent the next 6 hours in what felt like a combat operation, moving chickens in groups of 20 to shaded areas, hauling water from my well by hand, since the electric pump wasn't working. I strung up tarps, set up battery-powered fans I'd rushed to buy from the hardware store, and basically turned my ranch into a chicken refugee camp. By the time I'd moved the last group, I was drenched in sweat and exhausted, but I'd saved most of them. Still, 50 birds died from the heat, 50 innocent chickens because Linda Morrison wanted to play games. I buried each one, Patton standing guard, like he understood we'd lost soldiers in battle. That evening, Deputy Johnson happened to stop by with 20 gallons of water in his truck. "Strangest thing," he said, "not quite meeting my eyes." I was heading home and got this powerful thirst. Bought all this water, but turns out I can't drink it all. "You mind if I leave some here?" Betty Williams showed up an hour later with a home-cooked meal and a story that made my blood boil. "My son Tom used to own a nice little house 3 streets over." She said, "Linda decided his yellow door was non-compliant. Fined him every day for 6 months. He fought it at first. Spent thousands on lawyers, but she had connections with 3 judges. Eventually, he just gave up. Sold the house for half what it was worth. The buyer, a company called Paradise Development LLC, guess who owns that?" She didn't need to tell me. This wasn't just about control, it was about money. That's when Rosa Martinez knocked on my door. She was a popular blogger who covered real estate and property rights issues, and she'd heard about my situation. "Mason, I've been tracking Linda Morrison for 2 years," she said, camera equipment in hand. "She's done this to dozens of people, but you're the first one with both the grounds to fight back and the guts to do it. Mind if I document this?" The next day brought escalation. Linda had hired 3 law firms to make her harassment look legitimate, and they discovered that the lead lawyer was her brother-in-law. That would have been bad enough, but then she cut off my water supply, claiming emergency pipe maintenance. For 5 days, I had no power and no water on a working ranch in the middle of a Texas summer. I had to haul water from Betty's place, keep my chickens alive with a generator I couldn't really afford to run 24/7, and sleep in the barn to manually fan the birds through the hottest nights. By day 5, I was at my breaking point. I'd lost $30,000 in chickens and supplies. My life savings was draining fast, and I hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight in days. I even called my ex-wife in desperation, swallowing my pride to ask for a loan. She laughed and hung up. That night, I found myself sitting by Grandpa's grave at 2 in the morning. Patton perched on the headstone like a guardian angel. "I can't do this," I told the grave marker. "I'm going to lose your ranch. I'm so sorry." I was exhausted, financially, drained, and emotionally broken. For a moment, just a moment, I thought about giving up. About taking Linda's insulting offer just to make it stop. That's when I opened the envelope Betty had given me, the one from Grandpa. Inside was an old survey map from 1952 covered in coffee stains and handwritten notes. I studied it by flashlight, comparing it to modern property lines. And that's when I noticed something odd. The boundaries seemed wrong somehow, like a piece was missing from the current maps. Bradley arrived the next morning to find me surrounded by old documents and county records I dug up online. "You look like hell," he said. Then his expression changed when he saw what I had found. "Mason, am I reading this right?" I showed him the discrepancy. I discovered the land where the Willow Creek HOA had built their $2 million headquarters wasn't on any of their official property deeds. According to the records, that land had belonged to the old Texas Rails Company, which went bankrupt in 1987, But there was no record of the land ever being sold. It had just been forgotten, abandoned. And then in 2008, the HOA had built their headquarters on it without actually owning it. Holy, Bradley whispered. They built their entire power base on land they don't own. Mason, do you understand what this means? We can buy that land. We can buy the land right out from under them. Grandpa didn't just leave me a ranch, I told Bradley, as we stared at the old map. He left me a ticking time bomb with a 30-year fuse. The revelation about the HOA's building sitting on abandoned railroad land changed everything. But we had to move fast. If Linda discovered what we knew, she'd find a way to legitimize her claim or bury us in legal proceedings until we ran out of money. Bradley immediately got on the phone with his contacts, trying to track down who actually held the rights to the old Texas Rails Company land. Meanwhile, I had to pretend everything was normal while Linda continued her campaign of terror. The next morning, Patton woke me with urgent crowing. I stumbled outside to find 10 trucks dumping cow manure around the perimeter of my property, not on it. Linda wasn't that stupid, but just close enough that the smell would make the ranch unlivable. The drivers claimed they were fertilizing the empty lot next door, but the message was clear. I spent the day moving my chickens again, this time to the far side of the property. As I worked, Rosa filmed everything, building what she called a case study in HOA tyranny. That evening, Betty brought over dinner and crucial information. I used to work for Linda, she said quietly. 5 years as her personal secretary before she fired me for refusing to notorize documents I knew were fraudulent. I kept copies of everything, just in case. And Mason, there's something you need to know about why she hates your ranch so much. According to Betty, Linda had approached my grandfather in 2003 with an offer to buy his ranch. She'd had plans for a shopping center, investors, lined up everything. But Grandpa had taken one look at her plans, listened to her talk about modernizing the area, and told her exactly where she could stick her offer. He said, "This land has been feeding people since before you were born, Missy. It'll keep feeding them long after you're gone," Betty recalled. Linda begged, even got on her knees right there in his living room. But your grandfather wouldn't budge. She never forgave him for that humiliation. When she heard he'd passed and left the ranch to you, she saw her chance for revenge. The personal angle explained Linda's viciousness, but it also made her more dangerous. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Bradley's investigation hit pay dirt 2 days later. The heir to the Texas Rails Company rights was a man named Joseph Brooks living in Florida. He had no idea he owned land in Texas. Thought the company had sold everything off decades ago. When Bradley explained the situation, Joseph was shocked, but willing to sell. There was just one problem. He needed money for medical bills and wanted a quick sale. $100,000 cash. Deal closes in 48 hours. Take it or leave it. I had $20,000 in savings, and that was after selling everything I could. The ranch was already mortgaged to help pay for Grandpa's final expenses. Banks wouldn't lend to me because of the ongoing legal disputes with the HOA. I was desperate enough to literally get on my knees in the bank manager's office, a fellow veteran, begging for any kind of loan. Security had to escort me out. I sat on the curb outside, head in my hands, wondering how I'd come so far just to fail now. That's when Rose's video changed everything. She'd posted a compilation of Linda's harassment titled War Veteran Fights, HOA Mafia, and it exploded online, 5 million views in 6 hours. The comment section was full of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. And then something amazing happened. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign, Help Mason Save Paradise Ranch, it read. Within 24 hours, 10,000 people had donated, Small amounts mostly, $10 here, $20 there. But it added up fast. Veterans donated with messages like "See ya, Phi brother," and from one soldier to another. People who'd lost homes to HOAs wrote things like, "HOA killed my dream too, and get a Marine." In 48 hours, we raised $150,000. I sat at my computer watching the number climb, tears streaming down my face. These strangers believed in my fight. They believed in justice. Linda must have gotten wind of something. Because she went into overdrive, she organized a rally of 50 Willow Creek residents to protest outside my ranch, claiming I was destroying their community. She filed false police reports, saying I'd threatened her. She even tried to have animal control take my chickens, claiming they were a health hazard. But the crowdfunding campaign had done more than raise money. It had raised awareness. Reporters started showing up. Other victims of Linda's tactics came forward. The story was bigger than just my ranch now. It was about standing up to bullies, about communities supporting each other, about not letting the powerful crush the powerless. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, I had the money. Bradley and I drove through the night to Florida, met Joseph at his lawyer's office, and signed the papers at 11:59 p.m. As we drove back to Texas with the deed in hand, I thought about Grandpa's note. He'd known this day would come. He'd kept that old map for a reason, probably noticed the discrepancy years ago, but waited for the right moment. "Never sell Paradise Ranch," he'd written. Now I understood why. It wasn't just about keeping the land in the family, it was about being ready for the fight when it came. And now, with the deed to the land under the HOA building in my briefcase, I was ready to fight back. "You know what the best part is?" Bradley said as we crossed back into Texas. "Linda has no idea what's coming. She's so focused on destroying you that she hasn't bothered to check if her own house is in order." I smiled, thinking about the letter. That would arrive at the HOA building tomorrow. 60 days, I said. That's what we'll give them. 60 days to vacate my property or pay rent. Bradley laughed. This is going to be beautiful. The certified letter arrived at the HOA building at 9:20 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday morning. I know because Rosa had positioned herself at the coffee shop across the street with a telephoto lens, ready to capture the moment Linda Morrison's empire started to crumble. According to her play-by-play text messages, Linda's assistant signed for the letter, walked it into Linda's office, and 30 seconds later, the entire building heard the scream, "What do you mean we don't own this building?" Linda's shriek was so loud that people in the parking lot turned to stare. 20 minutes later, an ambulance arrived. Linda had fainted, hitting her head on her desk on the way down. While she was being checked for a concussion, Robert Morrison was frantically calling lawyers, each one telling him the same thing. The documentation was legitimate. They'd been squatting on railroad land for 15 years. Within hours, the Willow Creek HOA was in full panic mode. An emergency board meeting was called, and all 500 members were notified. The building was standing room only, with people demanding answers. "How could you not know we didn't own the land?" one resident shouted. "Where did our dues go if not to purchase the property?" another demanded. Linda, sporting a bandage on her forehead and looking like she'd aged 10 years in one day, tried to maintain control. "This is obviously a scam," she insisted. "Mason, Rivers is trying to extort us. We've been here for 15 years. We have squatters' rights." Bradley, who attended the meeting as my representative, stood up with a smile. "Actually, Ma'am, adverse possession in Texas requires 30 years of continuous, exclusive and hostile possession. You've only been here 15. Also, it helps if you actually pay property taxes, which you haven't because you can't pay taxes on land you don't own." The room erupted. 300 members immediately demanded Linda's resignation. The other 200, mostly her cronies, who'd benefited from her reign of terror, tried to shout them down. In the chaos, several crucial facts emerged. First, the HOA had spent $2 million building the headquarters, but had never actually purchased the land, assuming it was part of a package deal that no one had bothered to verify. Second, Linda had been taking a salary of $200,000 a year as president, which was supposed to be a volunteer position. Third, and most damaging, she'd been steering all the forced sales to her husband's development company, getting kickbacks on each one. The crowd turned ugly fast. Someone threw a coffee cup. Security had to escort Linda and Robert out the back. While angry residents pounded on their car. But Linda wasn't going down without a fight. She managed to use obscure bylaws to maintain her position temporarily and hired new lawyers to sue me for extortion. She claimed I'd forged the documents, that the whole thing was an elaborate fraud. She organized a media campaign painting me as a vengeful veteran, targeting a successful woman. For about a week, it looked like she might actually turn things around. She got a judge, one of her golf buddies, to issue a temporary restraining order preventing me from evicting the HOA. While the matter was investigated, she strutted around town like she'd won, telling anyone who'd listened that I'd be in jail soon. That's when she made her biggest mistake. Emboldened by her temporary victory, she escalated her attacks on my ranch. I woke one morning to find Patton crowing frantically. Outside, someone had spray-painted "Thrive" across my barn in red letters, 3F high. My truck tires were slashed. Worse, several of my chicken coops had been opened during the night, and dozens of birds were missing. I found feathers and blood trails leading to the road. Security footage showed 3 men in masks doing the damage, but the police said without clear identification, there was nothing they could do. I knew Linda was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. For the first time since this started, I felt truly defeated. I sat in my vandalized barn, surrounded by empty coos, and wondered if fighting back was worth it. That's when Deputy Johnson stopped by with interesting news. Those 3 judges Linda always uses, Internal Affairs has been investigating them for 6 months. Seems they've been taking bribes. Guess whose name keeps coming up in the investigation? The tide turned quickly after that. The restraining order was thrown out when the judge who issued it was arrested for corruption. Without her judicial protection, Linda's house of cards started collapsing. The State Attorney General's office opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. Paradise Development LLC's records were subpoenaed. Suddenly, Linda wasn't strutting anymore. She called me at 3 in the morning, her voice slurred like she'd been drinking. "What do you want?" she said. "Just tell me what it'll take to make this go away. I'll pay anything." I told her it was too late for backdoor deals. The land was going to public auction in 30 days, and anyone could bid, including the HOA. "How am I supposed to come up with millions in 30 days?" she wailed. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you tried to destroy my life," I said, and hung up. The announcement of the auction sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The HOA building wasn't just their headquarters. It was their identity. Without it, they'd have to meet in someone's living room like a book club. More importantly, whoever owned the land would own the parking lot, the community pool, and the tennis courts they'd added over the years. All of it was built on railroad land they'd never legally acquired. Brad helped me set the terms. Auction in 30 days, starting bid of $2 million, cash. Only payment due within 48 hours. It was aggressive, but legal. We posted notices in the local papers, online, and on a big sign right in front of the HOA building. The local news picked up the story. Veteran auctions, HOAs own land back to them. The irony was delicious, and the internet loved it. Chicken Justice started trending. Someone made T-shirts with Patton's picture and "Counterclockwise and Proud" written below. The morning of the auction, 300 people showed up at the Willow Creek tennis courts, which seemed like the perfect ironic venue for the sale of the land they sat on. News crews from 3 stations were there, and Rosa was live streaming the whole thing to her 1 million followers. I wore my marine dress blues for the occasion, not because I needed to prove anything, but because Grandpa would have wanted me to look my best while serving justice. Linda arrived in a black outfit that looked like she'd dressed for a funeral, which in a way she had. Her husband, Robert, was nowhere to be seen, and the gossip mill said he'd already filed for separation. She looked like she'd aged another 10 years in the past month, her usually perfect hair showing grey roots, her designer clothes replaced with off-the-rack kick basics. Bradley served as the auctioneer, and he'd done his homework. 5 serious bidders had registered, all real estate developers who saw an opportunity. The HOA had managed to scrape together their bid funds by demanding a special assessment from every member, $10,000 per household, non-negotiable. That had caused another wave of resignations, bringing their membership down to just 50. Die-hard supporters. They'd also sold off the community pool equipment, exercise machines from the gym, and everything else they could liquidate. According to Betty, who still had sources inside, they'd raised about $2 million total, probably hoping that would be enough since it was the starting bid. Linda sat in the front row, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white, surrounded by her remaining board members who all looked like they were heading to their own executions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bradley announced, "we're here today to auction 1.5 acres of prime commercial real estate currently occupied by a building and various improvements. Starting bid is $2 million. Do I hear $2 million? Linda's lawyer raised his paddle immediately. $2 million from the Willow Creek HOA, Bradley confirmed. A developer in the back raised his hand. $2 million? Linda visibly flinched. Her lawyer countered. $2.2 million. The developer smiled. 2.5, you could see the panic spreading across Linda's face. She grabbed her lawyer's arm, whispering frantically. He shook his head. They didn't have it. Another developer jumped in, 2.6, then another, 2.7. Linda was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, just like I described in the beginning. Her kingdom was crumbling and everyone was watching. That's when I stood up slowly, making sure everyone could see me. The crowd went silent. Rosa zoomed her camera in on my face. 2.8 million, I said clearly, and I'm exercising my right of first refusal as the adjacent property owner under Texas Property Code, Section 247.3b. The crowd gasped. Linda's lawyer jumped up. That's not valid. He can't do that. Bradley smiled. Lee, he can. As the owner of the adjacent Paradise Ranch and the land beneath this property, Mr. Rivers has the legal right to match any bid and claim priority. 2.88 million. Going once. No, Linda screamed, literally screamed. This isn't fair. He's stealing from us. Someone stop this. She tried to rush the podium, but her own board members held her back. Going twice, Bradley continued. Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. Sold to Mason Rivers for $2.8 million. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Cheers from those who'd been Linda's victims, boos from her remaining supporters. But I wasn't done with the theatrics. I walked to the podium and took the microphone from Bradley. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be clear about something. I don't want your building. I don't want your tennis courts or your pools. What I want is justice. I paused, letting that sink in. So here's what's going to happen. In 90 days, I'll hold another auction. The starting bid will be $4 million. Only the Willow Creek HOA can participate, and you must pay in full with certified funds. Within 48 hours, the crowd went silent, processing what I'd said. I was going to make them buy their own building back at nearly double the price. 4 million? Someone shouted. That's extortion. I shook my head. No, that's market value for commercial real estate. With improvements. You should have bought the land legally 15 years ago. This is just correcting that mistake with interest. Linda was helped to an ambulance, having fainted again. Robert appeared just long enough to be served with divorce papers by a process server. Apparently, he'd beaten Linda to the punch. The remaining board members huddled together, already trying to figure out how to raise $4 million. Many residents were openly discussing dissolving the HOA entirely rather than pay another massive assessment. The empire Linda had built on threats and intimidation was crumbling in real time, and the entire thing was being broadcast live to millions. As the crowd dispersed, Betty approached me with another manila envelope. "Mason," she said quietly, "there's one more thing you should know. I found this in Linda's old files." Inside was a photo from 20 years ago showing Linda at my grandfather's ranch, on her knees in his living room, begging him to sell. The humiliation on her face was clear, even in the old photograph. Behind her stood a younger Robert looking embarrassed. On the back, someone had written, "The day Richard Rivers said no, I'll make them pay." Now I understood. This had never been about property values or community standards. This had been about revenge, about a woman who couldn't handle being told no by someone she considered beneath her. She'd spent 20 years nursing that grudge, waiting for her chance. Well, she'd gotten her chance, and look where it had led her. Deputy Johnson found me as I was leaving. "Just thought you should know," he said. "Linda's been calling around trying to hire some unsavory types. Nothing specific enough to arrest her for, but watch your back." I nodded, not surprised. Desperate people do desperate things, but I had Patton and 500 chickens watching my back, plus half the internet rooting for me. Linda had already lost. She just hadn't accepted it yet. As I drove home, I passed the HOA building one last time. Someone had already put up a banner under new management soon. I smiled, thinking about what Grandpa would say if he could see this. Probably something about chickens coming home to roost. The irony would have delighted him. Justice served with a side of poetic karma, just the way he liked it. The envelope Betty had given me contained more than just that old photo. There were letters, documents, a whole history of Linda Morrison's vendetta against my family. Apparently, after Grandpa rejected her, she'd tried everything, sending health inspectors, filing nuisance complaints, even trying to get the ranch condemned. But Grandpa had friends in the right places and a lawyer who knew how to fight back. Every attack had failed, making Linda more furious and more determined. When she became HOA president 8 years ago, she'd finally gained the power she needed to wage war on anyone who opposed her. My ranch had always been the ultimate target, but she'd practiced on 12 other families first, perfecting her tactics. Now, reading through these documents while sitting in Bradley's office, I understood. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for all of them. 3 days after the auction, Linda and her 5 remaining board members requested a meeting. They looked like a funeral procession walking into the conference room, black clothes, defeated expressions, moving like they were heading to their own execution. Linda had lost at least 20 double B. Her skin was grey, and her hands shook as she sat down. The Powers suit was gone, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks that looked like they came from a discount store. The other board members weren't much better. These were people who ruled their little kingdom through fear and intimidation. And now they were the ones afraid. Bradley made them wait 45 minutes before we entered. A power play that would have made Linda proud in her better days. When we finally walked in, Linda's eyes were red from crying. "Mr. Rivers," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mason, please, I'm begging you." And then she did something I never expected. She got out of her chair and literally got on her knees. The other board members followed suit, all 6 of them kneeling on Bradley's expensive carpet like they were praying. "Please," Linda continued, tears streaming. "We'll do anything. The HOA will collapse without that building. People will lose everything they've invested. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But please don't destroy the whole community because of my mistakes." I let them kneel there for 5 full minutes, remembering that photo of her in the same position before, my grandfather. The silence was deafening except for Linda's quiet sobs. Bradley looked at me, waiting for my cue. Part of me wanted to let them suffer longer to really twist the knife. But then I heard Grandpa's voice in my head. The strong don't need to humiliate the weak son. Victory with honor. "Get up," I said finally. "All of you sit down and listen." They scrambled back to their chairs. Hope flickering in their eyes, I laid out my terms, slowly, making sure they understood every word. First, they would pay $5 million for the property. The true market value plus a premium for my trouble. Second, every current board member would resign immediately and be banned from serving in any HOA capacity for life. Third, they would pay me $500,000 in damages for the harassment, lost chickens, and emotional distress. Fourth, they would pay each of the 12 families they'd forced out over the years $100,000 in restitution. Fifth, they would erect a 3-foot bronze statue of a rooster in front of the building with a plaque reading Paradise Ranch, where justice comes home to roost. In memory of Richard Rivers, he saw this coming. Sixth, Linda would record a detailed video apology admitting to all her wrongdoing. And seventh, this was the kicker. Linda would work at my ranch for 1 year. "Work at your ranch," Linda's voice cracked. Doing what?" I smiled, managing the chicken coop's 5 a.m. start time every day, including weekends, minimum wage. You'll clean coops, collect eggs, feed the birds, and yes, deal with all that organic fertilizer you complained about. 1 year, or the deal's off. Linda's face went through several expressions. Shock, anger, humiliation, and finally, defeat. "But I don't know anything about chickens. I'm allergic to feathers. I have a bad back." Her protests were weak, and she knew it. This was her only option. Without this deal, she'd lose everything anyway, and probably face criminal charges for the financial irregularities the investigation had uncovered. "Those are my terms," I said. "Take them or leave them. You have 1 hour to decide." They didn't need an hour. After 30 minutes of heated discussion in the hallway, they came back and agreed to everything. Linda's hand shook so badly as she signed the papers that her signature was barely legible. Each page she signed seemed to age her another year. When she got to the employment contract for the ranch, she broke down completely. "I used to make $200,000 a year," she whispered. "Now I'll be making what is minimum wage now, $15 an hour." Bradley nodded. $725 in Texas, actually, but Mr. Rivers is generously offering 15. It was brutal, but it was justice. Every family she'd destroyed had lost more than money. They'd lost their homes, their dreams, their sense of security. A year of minimum wage work seemed like a small price for what she'd done. The bronze rooster statue was installed a week later. 3 feet tall, wings spread, head thrown back in an eternal crow. It was magnificent. The plaque was even better than I'd imagined, and the dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people. Linda had to attend as part of our agreement, wearing her new uniform, coveralls with Paradise Ranch embroidered on the back. She stood there as people took selfies with the statue, many of them her former victims, returning to see her downfall. The local news called it the most unusual corporate art installation in Texas. The internet called it the greatest revenge story ever told. But for me, it was closure. Grandpa had seen this coming, had prepared for it, and I'd finished what he couldn't. The statue wasn't just marking Linda's humiliation, it was honoring a man who'd stood his ground against a bully and won. Even from beyond the grave. 1 year later, I still wake up every morning to two sounds: Patton crowing his victory song and Linda sneezing from her chicken feather allergy. She shows up at 5 a.m. sharp, never a minute late, because she knows I'm watching. The woman who once terrorized an entire community now spends her days knee-deep in chicken coops. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some poetic justice in watching her trade her manicured nails for work gloves. But something unexpected happened over these 12 months. Linda actually became good at the job, really good. The chickens, who hated her at first, now follow her around like she's their mother. Patton, who used to chase her every morning, now perches on her shoulder while she works. Paradise Ranch has become something of a legend. We offer tours called Justice Rants Experience for $19 per person, with half the proceeds going to a Veterans Assistance Fund. People come from all over the country to see the famous bronze rooster, take pictures with Patton, and yes, catch a glimpse of the former HOA president shoveling chicken droppings. Rose's documentary series about our battle won 3 Emmys and sparked a nationwide conversation about HOA overreach. Patton has his own coffee table book, The Rooster That Defeated HOA, which somehow made the bestseller list. We've sold merchandise with Counterclockwise and Proud and pictures of Peyton that funded a complete renovation of the ranch. Who knew? A rooster could be such a marketing genius. The transformation in Linda has been remarkable. She's gone from a size 2 to a size 16, but she's healthier than she's been in decades. The physical work, regular hours, and simple purpose have done what years of yoga and spa treatments couldn't. I hate to admit it, she told me last week, but I sleep better now than I have in 20 years. No anxiety medication, no wine to fall asleep, just good old-fashioned exhaustion. Her ex-husband, Robert, is serving 3 years for tax evasion. Turns out his development company was as crooked as Linda's HOA tactics. He wrote her from prison asking for forgiveness, but she just laughed and went back to collecting eggs. Karma really is she said, then added with a slight smile. And apparently so was I. The Willow Creek HOA still exists, but it's a shadow of its former self. They paid the $5 million for their building, mostly by selling off common areas and assets. The 12 families Linda had driven out each received their $100,000 in restitution, and most used it as down payments on new homes in neighborhoods without HOAs. The new board operates with complete transparency, term limits, and a rule that no violation can be issued without a 75% vote of all members. They meet monthly in the shadow of the bronze rooster, a constant reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. The Paradise Ranch Act, inspired by our case, passed the Texas legislature last month. It limits HOA power and provides stronger protections for property owners. Governor Abbott signed it while standing next to our famous rooster statue. The impact of the Paradise Veterans Center exceeded all my expectations. Take Tom Martinez, for instance, a Marine who served 3 tours in Iraq and came to us after his family found him standing on the Riverside Bridge at 3 in the morning, ready to jump. His sister had seen our story online and drove him straight to the ranch. That first morning, Tom couldn't even look at the chickens without shaking. Now, 6 months later, he runs our morning therapy sessions, teaching new veterans how to approach the birds slowly. Speak softly, let them come to you. The chickens don't care about your nightmares, he tells them. They just need you to be present here now. Feed them, water them, that's all. Watching him work with both the birds and the veterans, you'd never know he once thought death was his only option. I used my portion of the settlement to create the Paradise Veterans Center on the ranch. We provide free therapy, job training, and, most importantly, chicken therapy for veterans dealing with PTSD. There's something about caring for chickens that grounds you, makes you focus on the present instead of the past. Grandpa knew it, and now 500 veterans a year discover it too. I married Rosa last spring in a ceremony at the ranch with Patton as the ring bearer. Yes, we trained him to carry a little pillow. Linda was invited and actually came, bringing a handmade gift that shocked everyone. A beautiful wooden sign that reads Family Ranch, where heroes heal. She'd carved it herself during her off hours, apparently taking up woodworking as a hobby. The wedding reception became something even more special when all 12 families Linda had driven from their homes showed up. Dorothy Chen, the retired teacher, who'd lost her house over yellow door paint, approached Linda during the reception. The whole tent went quiet as this 70-year-old woman walked up to her former tormentor. Linda tensed, probably expecting anger or accusations. Instead, Dorothy opened her arms. "I forgive you," she said simply. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do." After Linda broke down completely, sobbing into Dorothy's shoulder while 11 other families gathered around them. It became this incredible moment of group healing, victims and perpetrator, crying together, letting go of years of anger and pain. Rosa caught it all on camera, but we've never shared that footage. Some moments are too sacred for social media. As I stand here now watching the sun rise over Paradise Ranch while 2 sets of twins, hope and justice, faith and victory, play in the yard, I think about how different life could have been if Linda had never tried to force me out. If I just sold and walked away, none of this would exist. The Veterans Center, the documentary that changed HOA laws nationwide, the thousands of people who found courage to stand up to their own bullies, none of it would have happened. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. Sometimes you have to fight for your paradise. And sometimes, just sometimes, the rooster wins. Patton crows again, and this time Linda echoes it with a laugh. "You know what?" she calls out from the coop. "I think I'm going to miss this when my year is up next month." Linda set down her egg basket and really looked at Patton, who was pining his feathers in the morning sun. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said. "I spent 20 years hating this place, hating your grandfather, hating these birds, but they never hated me back. Even when I was at my worst, the chickens just saw me as the lady with the feed bucket." She paused, watching a hen lead her chicks across the yard. "Your grandfather knew something I couldn't see. This ranch doesn't just raise chickens, it raises people back up when they've fallen. It raised you after the war. It's raising those veterans every day. And somehow it raised me too." And she looked at me directly. "I don't want to leave, Mason. Not because I have to stay, but because I finally understand what this place really is. It's not just a ranch. It's a second chance factory." I smile, thinking about the offer I'm going to make her. Stay on as a paid employee, help run the veterans program, use her organizational skills for good instead of evil. Redemption comes in strange forms sometimes. The bronze rooster stands guard at the HOA building, reminding everyone of how this all started. But here, at Paradise Ranch, the real Patton struts around like he owns the place, which in a way, he does. After all, he's the one who charged at Linda that first day, setting everything in motion. Maybe Grandpa trained him for just that moment. Or maybe, as I like to think, some roosters are just born knowing when to fight. The sun climbs higher, bathing the ranch in golden light. Somewhere in the distance, I hear a tour group arriving, eager to hear the story of how one man, one ranch, and one remarkable rooster took down an H. And you know what? It never gets old in the telling. Hit that next video and let's keep the madness